Hi all, I'd like to present a really instructive game which was featured in Irving Chernev's Most Instructive Games of Chess Ever Played. In this game there's a really instructive theme of the knight outpost on d5. White was Isaac Boleslavsky and black was Georgy Lisitsin. So this was played in Moscow 1956. So e4 was played, and then we have the Sicilian defence played by Lisitsin. Knight f3, d6, and now d4, so it's the open Sicilian defence, standard stuff. And now g6, so the dragon variation. Bishop e3, bishop g7. So far it looks like it could be in any modern game. f3, castles. And now white played queen d2, so leaving that bishop at home on f1 for the moment. Knight c6, and now white just castled queenside. Here black took on d4, and after bishop takes d4, black played queen a5. So we seem to have the usual black queenside counterplay ideas, maybe bishop e6 later and a fast b5 perhaps. White played king b1, but here we witness an instructive strategic mistake. Black played actually e5. So there's 3 points I think to note about this after bishop e3. First of all, this bishop is now hemmed in potentially by this pawn on e5. Second of all, there's a backward pawn on d6 here now, which could be a liability. But third of all is this knight outpost potential on d5 that we have now. It's this further possibility strategically which is interesting. So how did white somehow make use of that hole in this game for it to be so instructive for a knight outpost on d5? We'll see. Black played bishop e6, so now we have 3 pieces seemingly protecting the d5 square. So the bishop, the knight and that queen on a5. This pawn, let's have a quick look at the tactics. If queen takes d6, according to Ribker actually bishop takes a2 is strong here, because if knight takes a2 then there's rook fd8 and there's a horrible skewer. So rook ad8, and the queen can't move because rook takes d1, so black would be better here. In fact, Ribker only gives a slight advantage for black for some reason after the loss of the queen. But anyway, let's go back. In the game bishop e6, so how did white somehow make use of this hole? The first move was a3. So maybe white is now threatening queen takes d6, no bishop a2 tactics. And now black defended that d6 pawn, and now we see knight b5. So the knight's coming to attack that, but also offering the trade of queens. Black didn't take the queen, instead played queen a4. And here we see a systematic undermining of the d5 square, using a brilliant pawn sacrifice here. So it's a very strategically deep pawn sack with the move c4. And this is what makes the game really, really impressive. If black doesn't take that pawn on c4, then it's a horrible kind of Maroczy bind on that isolated pawn on d6. And white could just return the knight and have a great position. Black took the pawn, and now after knight c3, an intermediate move, before recapturing that, before taking that bishop. So let's have a look at this position now. There's one less defender of the d5 square now, that f6 knight. So what does white do now? He eliminates that defender. So bishop g5. And now we see after queen e6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, knight d5. And look at how impressive this knight is now in the centre of the board. So it's like an octopus in all directions. It's what I would call a strategic trump card. Once you achieve this kind of strategic trump card, it really helps in tactical operations later. You know, if you want to go on the attack or play combinations, this knight will often now feature in variations. Black can't easily get at that knight, maybe with, you know, an exchange sack idea of rook c8 to c5, but otherwise that knight's staying there on d5. So queen h4 was played, and now white played queen e2. So the idea of this is to play queen f1 followed by g3. So the queen on f1 is making sure the black queen can't blockade white's attack with this queen h3 move. So bishop f8 and now queen f1. So rook ac8, g3. So the black queen's been pushed back. And now, after queen g5, we see the first major implication tactically of this strategic trump card. White plays h4. And all of a sudden, this pawn is immune. If queen takes g3, then rook h3, winning the queen. The queen can't go back to f4 because of the knight. So that knight's, is like an octopus. Its tentacles are in all directions here. So this is what I mean. The tactics the knight supports for the rest of the game, it makes it easy to play this attack. So queen h6 and now g4. And after g5, white's ripping open this h-file. And there's this target now, this isolated h-pawn on the semi-open file. Rook h5, and after queen g6, again, the white knight comes into to support a very beautiful move here, which is g5. So g5 and white's threatening knight f6, and all sorts of things. And the queen can't take on h5 because of knight f6 check, forking king and queen. So again we see another tactical implication of this knight on d5. So black played h6, and now white simply played rook takes h6. So the bishop can't take on h6 because guess what? Knight again to e7 check this time, forking king and queen. And in the game, white played queen takes g5, but here, the final move of the game, a beautiful move, was rook h5. So the queen can't take the rook because of knight f6 check. And if the queen goes back now, say to g6, then, there are two very powerful moves at white's disposal. Personally, I prefer queen h1 here, just protecting the rook and now threatening rook g1. Skewering the queen to the king. So say rook e8, rook g1, and it's just crushing. So let's have a look at this game again and focus heavily on this knight outpost theme on d5, which is what makes this game exceptionally instructive in my view and in Chernev's view. So it started off with a dragon, Sicilian dragon, white castling queenside, and we see this classic strategic mistake. So there's 3 points about this, which the main point though is this d5 square, how wonderfully this was exploited by white. So he played a3, not being tempted by that d6 pawn, because the bishop takes a2 as a refutation. So black now protected the d6 pawn, and we saw now knight b5, and after queen a4 the c pawn is offered to the black bishop to remove these two defenders, to re-establish this knight outpost on d5. So a temporary pawn down, and now we see the pin bishop g5, so the f6 knight is eliminated, and now the huge octopus is established, after which white's attack really plays itself. White goes for the king basically, and just able to play moves like h4, because queen takes g3 was rook h3, and simply white's attack was just too much for black here. This octopus on d5, this strategic trump card, helps white's attack just easily play itself with some very beautiful moves. So after queen g5 takes g5, just rook h5 was the final move. A crushing game, and I hope you see how powerful a knight established on d5 can be from this game. Thanks very much. Please leave any comments on YouTube.